It's so nice to see you. So the good news, as I said, is that there are more of us here this week. More people, and the other news, the bad news, is that we have a snafu with the audio situation. So only I can hear you, and probably only you can only hear me, unless other people speak very loudly, and even still, probably not so well.
I heard Alice.
Oh, great! That's great.
And I just heard you saying, I heard Alice.
Right. Oh, yeah, you can hear each other.
I just heard Renee say, I hear Alice.
Yeah, right. So you all can hear each other, but the residents and apprentices cannot hear you. That's the current situation.
But you can translate it just.
Yeah, so I'll just have to translate. Daniel just mentioned that he could hear my mom say that she heard Alice. I think I won't try to translate everything, but I'll do my best to repeat questions and such, keep the important bits. So let's go ahead and start this off with a little bit of practice time. So everyone, wherever you are, let's just spend a little bit of time coming into our posture. Establishing a sitting posture that is stable and elevated, and a breath that is both relaxed and energetic. Having established this posture and breath, finding a way to sit that is both relaxed, stable, and also elevated, upright. Spend a little bit of time purifying our state of mind of the 5 hindrances. In Buddhism, they're taken to be 5 primary hindrances to practice. We'll just move through them one by one. Starting with covetousness, desire for sense, pleasure, things of the world, or for states of bliss. Taking some time to be with that and work through that. You can do this just by noticing if there is any covetousness and if there is not. There's covetousness, notice this is a mind subject to covetousness. This is what it's like to experience covetousness. And if there's not, then notice this is what it's like to experience a mind free from covetousness. Noticing as well if there is any ill will. Moving on to hindrance of ill will or hatred. If there is hatred, notice what that's like. And if there isn't, notice what that's like. Moving on to sloth and torpor, stupor, drowsiness, dullness, complacency. Notice what it's like if there is sloth and torpor in experience. And perhaps through purifying it, perhaps it goes away on its own. Notice what it's like if there isn't. Notice what it's like to be free from sloth and torpor. And notice if there's any anxiety, restlessness, remorse, worry and flurry. If there is, notice that. Notice what it's like. And pay attention to the experience of anxiety. And if there isn't, because you've actively purified it, or because it's just gone away on its own, notice what that's like too. And finally, moving on to shallow doubt. Notice what it's like if there is shallow doubt. Having the direct experience of doubt in that moment. There is not doubt. We're clear that we are experiencing doubt. And so notice what that's like too. And having moved through these 5 hindrances, covetousness, hatred, sloth, anxiety, and doubt, take just a little bit of time to attend to the breath. Centering awareness in the belly on the breath. Of course, there may be a certain amount of momentum, pulling the attention elsewhere, for example, up into the head. And we just simply keep on returning the breath to the belly, by returning the attention to the belly. Again and again, turning our attention to the breath, the belly, and keeping it on that direct sensation of the breath. And it seems like we're doing it. It's going pretty well. That's great. That means we've gotten distracted. Our attention has moved up into our head. We're telling a story about the breath. And so we simply bring our attention back to the breath in the belly and lay it on the breath in the belly. If we're sitting here and thinking, I can't do this, that's great. It means we've become distracted. Our attention has moved up into our heads, into story. Simply bring it back to the breath in the belly and lay it on the breath in the belly. Whatever story comes up, whatever way of seeing things arises, in this practice, returning the attention to the breath. Very good. And decide now how you'd like to move forward. If you'd like to just continue with this practice, attending to the breath, letting everything else wash over you, but the sound of my voice or anything else in the world isn't any different from water rolling down a river in the mountainside, or whether you'd like to set that aside, move that into the background, and engage in a more active form of listening and engaging with this event. Either way is fine, it's all good. Just make a decision, and then we will move on. Okay, so again, nice to see everyone. You're all very tiny right now. Maybe, Chaochu, is there a way you can make them bigger? I also don't know quite who you all are. It seems like there are many of you there, so that's exciting. I think let's go ahead and do introductions. Let's just do introductions. So very brief, since it seems that there are quite a few people. How many people are there? 14. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so there are many people. Let's just say your name and where you're calling from and one object that is in the room with you. Say the name of one object that is in the room with you. So Chaochu, maybe you can direct, so just say people's names, pull up the list of participants and then go one by one.
Sure.
Just alphabetical order is fine.
Sure. Can you guys hear me? Cool.
Yes.
Let's start with Daniel Blank.
I'm Daniel. I'm from Berkeley, and one thing in this room is a laptop.
Great, laptop.
Cool. David D.
Maybe speak up a little bit more than that.
Oh, David D. Not sure if he's there.
No, David, let's move on.
Okay, Donnie Christie.
Can't hear you, Donnie.
Donnie, you're muted. Yeah, I can't.
All right. Hi, I'm Donnie.
There we go.
I'm hailing from Berkeley, and one object in this room is a gigantic bottle of hot sauce.
Great.
Put it on everything.
Very good. Hot sauce. Next.
Henry Andrews.
Henry.
Yes, I'm Henry. I'm calling from San Francisco, and one object in the room is a large paper mache bunny head mask.
Nice. Bunny head paper mache mask.
Cool. James Helmuth.
Oh, James. James.
Jim, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, moving on.
Moving on.
Jeff Bergen.
Jeff Bergen?
Jeff introduced himself via chat.
Sorry?
Jeff introduced himself in the chat.
Oh, very good. Jeff introduced himself in the chat. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Next.
Having connection trouble.
And maybe you want to read what Jeff said.
Jeff hailing from El Cerrito, having connection trouble though, sadly.
Got it.
Jeremy Schletter.
Oh, Jeremy.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm in Berkeley, and there's an orange marker in the room with me.
Nice to see you, Jeremy, and the orange marker.
Pam Tarlow. Is not responding.
Pam Tarlow. Pam.
I think she's working on unmuting.
She's also not
Yeah.
responding.
I am.
Oh,
I
there
just
it is.
unmuted.
There we go.
Hello, I'm Pam.
Hi, Pam.
Tarlow. Hi. I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm doing this on my brand new iPhone 11, which I just set up an hour ago.
Wow. Exciting. iPhone 11.
Yeah.
Cool.
Peter Bora.
Hi, I'm Peter Bora, calling from San Francisco. An object in this room is a quantity of air.
Nice to see you, Peter, in the quantity of air.
Renee D.
Mama D.
Hi, I'm Renee D. Hi, Pan. Hi, everyone. I'm in Akron, Ohio, and an object in this room is a bassoon.
Great. Renee's in Akron with a bassoon. Kind of like Clue.
Richard D.
Hey, Rich.
Richard D. This is nice. It also helps us debug audio issues at the beginning rather than partway through.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can.
All right, so this is Richard D. from the second floor in Akron, Ohio, and Atticus the dog is in the room with me.
Great. Richard D. is in the second floor in Akron with Atticus, the dog.
Tom Duterme. Not sure.
Tom. Tom Duterme. No audio yet.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, sorry about that. Hi everyone, it's Tom. I'm trying to figure out how to turn on my camera, but I can't seem to do that. So I'm calling from Los Altos, California, and I have a measuring tape in my room.
Great. So Tom is in Los Altos with a measuring tape.
New person. Let's see.
Who is next? Keep it moving.
Okay, so you're near. That was talking already.
Hi.
Munir Hirschberg.
Yes.
So I'm Munir. I'm from San Jose, and I have some chocolate.
Nice. Munir is from San Jose with some chocolate.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Likewise.
And Zara.
Hello, I'm Zara. I'm in Berkeley, California, in a house named Godric's Hollow. This is the attic, and I am with Sylvia, the baby goat.
Zara is in Godric's Hollow in Berkeley, in the attic with, is that Sylvia, the baby goat?
Sylvia.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Very good. It's not a real goat. Oh, it's a real one. It's a real stuffed goat. Wonderful.
David D is having trouble with his microphone and is calling in from San Francisco.
Great. And then anyone else?
And Garish.
Oh, Garish.
Just joined. I think he wasn't here for the instructions.
Yeah, so the instructions are say your name, where you're from, and one thing that is in the room with you. And also unmute.
Yeah. Oh, now he's gone.
Oh no. Okay. Oh,
Okay.
Garish. Well, that's how it goes. So maybe he will come back. Let's just go ahead and get started. That was pretty good. That only took 7 minutes or so, and now I know who's there and heard each other's voices. It feels a little bit more like we're together. I appreciate that. So the topic for this week is the path. And specifically how the path relates to what is happening in the world right now. What Buddhism has to say about this, if anything. What the Eightfold Path has to say about this. You know, how shall we see this? This is a common question that people ask teachers. You have a teacher in a monastery. It's quite common that people will ask the question, how shall we see this? And that's maybe a good starting point, actually, how we see things. Because we do that actually quite a bit. You can tell that someone is in that role, that they're filling that role for you, if you find yourself asking them, how shall we see this? In a way that you take seriously. So commonly throughout history, spiritual teachers have been in that role of various sorts. Priests in the Christian tradition, roshis and ajahns and such in the various Buddhist lineages, rabbis. All of these people have been seen as people who you ask how you see things. And of course, in the modern world, we also have teachers. We go to our therapist and we ask, say, I have this problem, how shall I see it? The therapist says, gives us a way of seeing it. Well, how do you feel about it, for example? We say, look at it in terms of how you feel. And we look at it in those terms, and then something happens. So that's the very first point, is this question of how we see things. How should we see things is basically the domain of spirituality, and I would even say of religion. That one way that you could say it, of course, there are many different ways you can define a religion that will include certain things and exclude other things. I would say that one way that you can define a religion is that it makes a statement in this vein, that it makes a statement about what is. That if there is some framework or system or organization that is making a statement about what is, in particular about what is real, then that you could just say is defined to be a religion. I actually rather like looking at things in that way. It's a way of looking at things that I'm quite fond of. So I'm now offering that way to you, offering that you see in that way, that you see organizations that are inviting you to see things in ways as religions. And it's often the case that when a major event like this happens, it coincides with a transition in religion. It has often happened historically that events like this coincide with the fall of a certain way of seeing things and the rise of a new way of seeing things. And I think often because, simply enough, people ask that question. They'll ask that question, how should we see this? And the old religion doesn't have an answer. It isn't able to give a satisfactory answer to the question. So, for example, in the 14th century, there was another pandemic that happened. Of course, the bubonic plague, the Black Death, swept through Europe and the world and killed many, many people. Killed maybe, estimates vary from 30 to 60% of the world's population. It was a far worse plague, a far worse illness than the coronavirus. Coronavirus is quite bad, but it looks like at worst it will kill maybe 5, 10, up to 15% of people in the very worst possible case. Whereas this could kill, whereas rather the bubonic plague killed 30 to 60% of the population. So it was a very bad event, a major tragedy, a tragedy that I think we now have more of a sense of, more of an emotional connection to than we ever have before, than we have certainly in our lifetimes. And people ask that question. People ask the question, how shall we see this? They asked it of course, the incumbent religion at the time, Catholicism. They asked the church, how should we see this? What is God's message for us in this event? Because the church's position was that everything is God's plan, and it is for humans to receive that plan and understand it, or live according to it. And of course, there's an answer that you can give. There's a sort of clear, obvious answer that one can give to that situation as it's beginning to unfold, which is, maybe don't trade so much with other countries. Maybe keep your borders closed a little bit, improve your sanitation processes, work on your hygiene, implement social distancing. This is a sort of obvious, correct answer to give to this question. The Catholic Church, for whatever reason, wasn't able to give that answer. You could say maybe they didn't know, they didn't they weren't aware of that answer, but that isn't, as far as I can tell, really quite true. It was fairly common knowledge at the time that, for example, if a ship was coming in with goods on it, you would embargo that ship. You would quarantine the ship. You would keep it in port for 40 days, and then let the goods off of it. So it was known that trade was spreading the plague in that way, and yet for some reason the Catholic Church couldn't give that answer, and maybe they couldn't give that answer in terms of the framework that they had established. And I would suggest that maybe the reason that they couldn't give that answer is that it wasn't an answer that we were ready to hear. Because the answer, if this is all God's plan, if everything is unfolding according to God's plan, the answer, the point made by something like the Black Death, is that humanity, the human species, is not a particularly special part of God's plan. The human race is not particularly special among nature. It isn't particularly privileged among species. It isn't particularly special. It isn't exempt from the fate of other species. And the Catholic Church was not in a position where it could give that answer, and so the church fell. The church fell, in fact, soon after the plague. So we can ask, what is the message in this? We have this situation that is sweeping across the world, producing enormous amounts of suffering, enormous amounts of fear, enormous amounts of panic, and also enormous amounts of physical suffering, emotional suffering, grieving, losing loved ones. We can ask the question, how should we see this? And I would suggest that there are kind of a few messages in here. There are at least a few things that to me are really interesting about this, that are really noteworthy about this. The first of these messages is that, well, just in terms of Buddhism, there is impermanence. Things don't last. In fact, our own lives don't last. I think that actually is the message that most of us have heard in this pandemic. That's the main message that we've heard, that we're not going to make it. And it isn't a particularly new message. It isn't a particularly novel message. It's been said many times before. People say it again and again and again, and we even say it ourselves. We say we heard it, and we say it. And yet, we don't really hear it. And so it takes something like this for us to hear it. It takes it getting that personal. It takes it affecting our species, in fact, our family and our friends, for us to take notice. And I think that we're actually responding in the way that you would respond, that it is reasonable to respond when you hear that message, when you realize the truth of impermanence, when we realize that our lives won't last forever, that we won't make it, that each day that we have is precious and is not guaranteed, we naturally take action. Of course we take action. It isn't like the kind of Western conceptualization of Buddhism that's been going around lately that says you should be okay with things as they are. You're going to die and you should just accept that. You're going to die and therefore enjoy drinking tea a little bit more. That isn't what we're doing. And I think it's reasonable that that isn't what we're doing. It's good that that isn't what we're doing. Because that isn't what's appropriate to do. When we realize that we're going to die, we realize the urgency of the situation, we naturally rally everything that we have to address that situation. This is natural. This is reasonable. The issue is that our response to it is limited by the way that we see things. It's limited by our point of view. It's limited by our perspective. Again, we're really stuck on the idea that humans are special, that we alone among the animal kingdom are the ones that matter. This is the philosophical principle of humanism. Man is the measure of all things, and is, I would say, the main religion in our world today. It's the religion that psychotherapy promulgates. It's the religion that many people live their lives according to, and I think it's the main reason that this pandemic in particular has become such a big deal. Because this is not the biggest issue facing even our species. And by no means, it is nowhere close to the biggest issue facing life on Earth. Soru and I were talking about this the other day. Soru Forall is the head teacher at our sister organization in Vermont, Maple, my teacher and the founder of the organization. We were talking about this, and he just said, you know, first of all, the Black Death was way worse than coronavirus. And second of all, the Black Death was not as bad as the climate crisis will be. And in fact, currently is for most of life on the planet. The ecological destruction of habitats, the extermination systematically of life is at a much larger scale than either of these pandemics. And neither of those, maybe the climate crisis in a fully terminal scenario could approach this, but neither of those are as bad as the nuclear war, as the potential, the possibility for a terminal war that irradiates the planet and eradicates all life. And neither of those are as bad as runaway artificial intelligence, as the possibility that we build AI that goes awry, that exterminates all life in the galaxy, all life in its observable light cone. And we hear people talk about this and we think, well, that's just not real. It doesn't connect with us. And I would suggest that that's actually just because we're ignorant. And I think that this is a unique moment in history in which we are able to just clearly make that statement. Because we have a clear example of this having played out in just the last couple of months. So you all know, you were there, I was there, we were all there, we got to see what happens. We had an event coming that was on an exponential growth curve, the coronavirus. How did we respond to it? We get to examine that. You know, where were you when you first heard about coronavirus? When the first person in your life mentioned coronavirus, how did you respond? If you responded with complacency, with a sense that this is going to be no big deal, you now have direct experience. You now know exactly what it feels like to be dangerously delusional. You know firsthand in your own experience what the feeling, what the experience of potentially fatal delusion is. Think of the first person who came to you and said, I'm scared about coronavirus. I think it's going to be a big deal. How did you respond? Did you say, oh, you're just confused. Let me help you out of this confused, deluded perspective. Well, now you know what it's like to be wrong, to be sure that you're right about something that you're wrong about. Now you know. Now we know. And we should know, we should ask as well, who were the ones who were predicting this? Who were the ones who were talking about this in advance? Were there people who were talking about this back in January, February, when the disease first showed up? Who were those people? And what else were they talking about? We should ask that question. And I'll just tell you my experience of it. Yours is different, of course. You have to be the judge of your own experience, but my experience is that all of my friends in the rationality community started freaking out about this in January and February. And the people who were freaking out about this were exactly the same ones who have been freaking out for over a decade about artificial intelligence, about the potential for runaway development of artificial intelligence to destroy life. But we should consider that if we think that they're just being naive or exaggerating, or confused, or it's just their own biases, or whatever it is that we're saying, then maybe we're just delusional. We need to consider that possibility. So that's the second point. It's just the issue actually is our human mind. The issue actually is the human mind. The real problem that's behind this problem for us, because of course it's a problem. There are problems for the other living beings involved, but the problem for us is largely created by our way of seeing things, by our mind. This may sound like kind of a bummer, kind of a downer, but I actually take this as quite heartening. Because it means that if we want to solve the problem, all we have to do is see that there is a problem. This is another thing that we have direct evidence for now. We have incontrovertible evidence. There are all these systems. People make all these excuses, with climate, with artificial intelligence. They say, well, you can't do anything about it because it's a product of all of these emergent systems that are bigger than any one person. And everyone's doing it all together. So no one person can do anything about it. Well, we now have incontrovertible proof that that's wrong, that's incorrect. And if we find out that the way to solve a problem is to crash the market, we will crash the market. We should be proud of this. Think about it. It's incredible. If we find out that the way to solve this problem is to crash the market, then we can crash the market. That's incredible. All we had to know was that there was a problem. As soon as people knew that there was a problem, we took the steps that were required to address it. Shut down trade, close borders, lock down the spread of the virus, prevent it from spreading. All that's required is for us to see that these other problems are problems, and we will address them in the same way. This is heartening. This is really exciting to me. It's very heartening to me to know that we as a species actually can see that there is a problem and can take the steps that we find out that we should take, that we believe we should take. Which means that the issue, the problem, is just to believe what is true. And that is the problem. That's what we have to do. That's it. You say it's intractable, it's insurmountable, but it's not. Because it's just our own minds. We are making the problem. And therefore, we can stop the problem. We're making the problem, and therefore we can stop making the problem. So that is how I would recommend that we see this situation. There's a particular story, sutra in the Pali Canon that is that kind of goes along these lines. It's one that I spent a little bit of time on studying this past awakening period, which everyone at Oak was on. All the residents here were in silence and not able to use electronic devices for the past week. So you're now looking at the faces of people who have known for one day how bad it's been for us all for a week. So maybe that's a blast from the past, or maybe it's kind of heartening, I don't know, but this is what it's like. So I spent a little bit of time studying this text. And the text is, the Pali term for it is the Pabba To Pamma Sutta. And in English, it's the simile of the mountains. So this text is a discourse of the Buddha with a particular king, King Pasenadi of Kosala. Took place 2,500 years ago. Kosala was a region in ancient India. And King Pasenadi was someone who was a devoted follower of the Buddha, who appreciated the Buddha, went to him for advice and teachings, and was also a great king. He ruled over a large territory, conquered a large swath of land. But one time, he went to see the Blessed One. The Blessed One asked him, after they'd exchanged greetings and pleasantries, where were you just coming from? Where were you just now before you came to see me? And the king said, I was just in the palace enjoying the sense pleasures of kinghood, intoxicated with the intoxicants of sovereignty, as he says. He was having fun and, getting drunk and exhorting with his servants and concubines and such, listening to fine music, eating delicious foods, and generally speaking, having it very good. Having it the way that a king would have it, which is to say, almost as good as we have it today. Almost, but not quite as good as any of us have it right now. We, are able to call into this using an electronic device, and in all likelihood have it significantly better than him. He may have been a king, but we can have a waterfall of water at any temperature we like pour down on us at any time that we feel like it. Of course, it's gotten maybe a little bit harder now. We can no longer fly through the air and appear anywhere else in the world quite so easily, so we've been kind of taken down a peg. But nevertheless, he still had it fairly good in the same way that we have it fairly good. And he just gave that straightforward answer to the Buddha. It was impressive. It was actually quite impressive that he would just give that answer. Not do what so many of us do and say, well, I'm enjoying this fine food actually out of compassion. It's actually because everyone should enjoy fine food. That's why I'm eating this fine food. He just said, yeah, I'm enjoying, I'm intoxicating myself. I'm deluding myself. I'm following the chords of sense pleasure. And so the Buddha could hit him, could respond in a way that was, a little bit of a wake-up call. So he said, well, suppose, great king, that one of your messengers were to come to you from the east and tell you that they'd just come from the east, and there they'd seen an enormous mountain coming this way at great speed, crushing all life in its path, leaving nothing in its wake. And they were to say to you, do as you see fit. Do as you see fit right now, great king. And then you were to see a messenger come from the south. Say, I've just come from the south, and I just saw a great mountain coming this way, as tall as the sky, coming this way at great speed, crushing all life in its path. Nothing can survive it. Do as you see fit. The messenger were to come from the west and from the north, and they were all to say the same thing. The mountain is coming from the west, the mountain is coming from the north. In all four directions, in any way that you turn, there's this huge, unstoppable force coming straight at you, crushing everything in its wake. In those circumstances, what would you do? Buddha asked. How would you conduct yourself? What would you do? And the king said simply, if that were the case, the human life being so precious, so hard to obtain, being so unlikely that you were to be born as a human, that being such an unusual state of events, such an unusual circumstance, what else would you do but Dhamma conduct? Do good deeds. Do meritorious deeds. Be generous. Help people. Compassionate. Kind. Give gifts. Give offerings. Follow the Dharma. Follow the true teaching. What else would you do? What else is there to do? So the Buddha could say, well, then I inform you, great king, death is coming in for you. It's inescapable. It's coming from all sides. There's no way to get out of it. There's no way to escape from it. Therefore, how should you conduct yourself? This is the essential message. The message that's so hard to hear and yet so essential to hear. That we don't have all the time in the world. That this body is, it isn't any different from a company or something. From maybe a laptop. You all have laptops maybe, or iPhones or something. So you can look at the laptop and you can know, well, this laptop is here right now. And one day it's going to fall apart. That just is how it is. Considering that we can use it. We can make use of it, knowing that it will fall apart. Now, in the same way, this body is just going to fall apart. It already is falling apart. You feel uncomfortable, achy, pain, you get sick. The body's falling apart, so just make use of it. How do we make use of it? By being generous, kind, helping other people, risking our life. Make use of it by risking our life. Because we see that this life isn't something that we actually have. Seeing that, in a way, we don't need to fear death anymore. Of course, it's reasonable to protect our body, to protect our health, take care of ourselves. This is reasonable. But to fear death is not reasonable, because that just is how it is. We are going to die. If not today, then later on. We don't have a choice about it. Which means that if we're evaluating what to do in the world, we don't have to just consider, how do I make sure that I don't die? That, of course, can be on our priority list. It's good to consider it. It's good to take care of our health. And frankly, it doesn't have to be at the top of our priority list. And I think that actually, the reason that this one got through to us, that coronavirus got through to us, that nothing else got through to us, the climate crisis didn't get through to us, AI didn't get through to us, is that this is the one that's reminding us that we're going to die. It's contradicting our religion. It's contradicting the religion, the way of doing things that we have been following for the past few thousand years, of doing everything in our power to not die at the expense of murdering other living beings. We don't want to die so much that we will do anything at all to prevent dying. We'll kill entire species in order to prevent ourselves from dying, in order to buy ourselves a little bit more time, in order to increase our average lifespan. Which, by the way, while we've succeeded in doing, we need to actually look closely at this. Because as far as I can tell, in the last 1,000 years of medical science, we haven't actually increased the maximum lifespan of a human by 1 year. Humans still grow to the same age if they don't have a reason to die. It's just that we've gotten better at resolving the reasons that people die before they die, before their time to die. Which is, you could say, good, and yet, what is the last 10 years of our lives like? What is that like? Well, in all likelihood, we're going to be hooked up to a machine, alone in a room, abandoned by everybody, because we're also afraid of death, that we don't want to look at old people, don't want to face that we might be like that someday. So we have to actually ask, is that worthwhile? Is it good to be doing things that way? Is that a life that's worth living? Is that a life that's worth killing for? So I would suggest that we really take this opportunity to look at our religion and ask, how should we see this? How should we see our lives? And therefore, what should we do? Of course, if you have an is, if you have how things are, then you have to have an ought. Take a certain is, a certain way that things are, and there just is an ought that comes from that. That becomes the other thing that a religion does. Says, here's how things are, and based on that, here's what we should do. So we'll now spend a little bit of time practicing something to do. I have something to do now for a little while. And then we'll move into a discussion. And then again, we'll move into a period of time where we can talk about taking action in the world. Talk about ways that we can act, about what we ought to do. Because again, I hope it's clear, maybe for some of you who are tuning in, it may not be clear. When I'm saying that we should sit still, we should relinquish our perspective, I am not saying that we shouldn't take direct action in the world. On the contrary, we relinquish our perspective in order to see things more clearly, in order to take appropriate action in the world. So please know that I'm not advocating that we sit forever when I say that we sit now. The same way as when someone says that it's daylight, and later on maybe they say that it's night, they aren't contradicting themselves. Just the same way, I'm going to say that the only thing in the world to do right now is sit and relinquish our perspective. And maybe we will live for the next few minutes, and after that we can talk about other things to do. So take a little bit of time to once more establish a posture for sitting. Moving awareness into the legs and lower body. And stabilize this connection to the earth. Sit in such a way, or stand or lie down in such a way that we are firmly planted in the ground. And out of that stable base, we extend our spinal column up towards the sky. Let our posture is elevated, upright, and alert, and also stable, calm, held. Having prepared to practice, I'll enter into a period of meditation. Once more, we'll practice by purifying the hindrances. You can do this in your own time, at your own pace, and in any way you like. You can do what we did earlier, just using direct attention. You can explore using the breath to purify them, the posture to purify them directly, or work with them in any other way. It's good to get creative about this. It's commonly the case that one of them in particular is dominant at a particular time. So if at some point you find one that is the one, whatever it may be, then it's reasonable to stop there and spend some time with it. So the hindrances again are covetousness, ill will, sloth and torpor, anxiety, restlessness, and shallow doubt. You're sitting here and you don't want to purify the hindrances. Good news, that's slothfulness and torpor. But you just get to work with that now. You can work with it in any way. Be mindful of it. Try to purify it. Which if you try to purify it, you've succeeded at purifying that one in particular. Work with it in any way. You're saying, this doesn't make sense, I don't know why I'm here. Well, good news. That's the doubt hindrance. Work through it. Work with it in any way. Oh no, I have to purify the hindrances. I don't know how. I got to find it. Well, that's anxiety. So work with it. Work through it. Say, I'm bad. I shouldn't be doing this, or I should be doing that. And I'm not, and that makes me a bad person. I should suffer. Well, good news, that's ill will. Work through it. Work with it. Say, gosh, I really want to be free from all of these hindrances. That would be so nice. That's covetousness. Work with it. Work through it. In this way, we just keep directly meeting the next experience that arises, overcoming whatever obstruction there is that's preventing us from giving ourselves to it fully. We can do this. Why? Because we are creating these obstructions. We are obstructing wisdom. And so we can stop. If all the hindrances have been disabled, none of them are present. We have relief from them. And good news, we can just sit here experiencing the huge joy, the boundless, limitless joy of connection with every living being. And to sit here and radiate that joy. Spread that joy throughout the whole world. Kind of joy that's more fulfilling, more joyful than our life. Very good to spread that joy throughout the whole body. Hindrance arises, just work through that hindrance. Attend to it, study it, explore it. It passes away. Notice that there isn't any relief in that, any sense of joy or gladness, and even momentary freedom from that hindrance. You wanted something. You wanted it so much. You're obsessing over it. Your whole mind's dedicated to how to get it. And you find that just by simply not wanting it anymore, we're free from all that. It's like we've come out of debt. We were under huge debt. We've been freed from that debt. We've paid it all off. Just like that. Just by being free from that want. We're feeling hatred. We're so mad. Wished those people would suffer, would die. It was making our bodies weak, tired. It hurt. It hurt us so much. Like we were sick, had a disease. And when it passes away, we bring forth compassion successfully for those people. It's like we've gotten healthy again. We've gotten our strength back. We're sitting here stuck in a rut, complacent, nodding off, doing the same thing again and again. It's like we're in prison. We're imprisoned. We're imprisoned by our own mental habits. And it's by working through that, shaking it off. It's as though we've been set free and we can wander around wherever we like. And this anxiety, worry, always telling us what to do. Always saying, you have to do this, you have to do that, don't do that, you shouldn't have done that. Do that soon. You might do that. It's like we're enslaved. It's like we don't have free will. We have to just do someone's bidding all day long. We can't choose what to do. Just follow that anxiety. Just by getting free from that, it's as though we've been set free. We can live where we please, do what we please. And shallow doubt, this vague meandering through the thicket of views, the desert of views, just constantly trying to take on this view and that view and try to find the right view, the right way to see it, the right opinion, find out what the root of all things is. It's as though we're wandering in a desert, We're thirsty, and we have property, and we could be robbed. We're unsafe. And just by cutting through that doubt, by directly cutting through that doubt, it's as though we've arrived in a land of safety. We finally respond to what's happening. And eventually, this process itself becomes fun. Aaron comes up, we're just excited. Here we go. I don't know how I'm going to work through this. What's going to happen? I don't know. Let's find out. We try this, we try that. It's just an adventure. That adventure itself becomes a source of fulfillment. How do we attend directly to this breath? How to do it? We don't know. And try something anyway. Here we go. This itself becomes fun, becomes fulfilling, becomes enlivening. Just to take this breath and attend to it as it is. We don't know how to do that. And yet, we can do that. Very good. In a little while, a couple minutes, I'll ring the bell, and we'll transition into more of an active conversation. Let us take this last little while, minute or so, throw everything that you have into this practice. It's going to be over soon. Why not throw yourself in completely? Very good. So now, a little while, we'll have some time to have a discussion about the practice. And then we'll open it up for a discussion about ways that we can take action in the world. Well, if anyone has anything they'd like to share, feel free to unmute and start talking.
What hindrance is it when your mind just wanders away from direct experience of the breath in the belly and starts thinking about, say, I should really remember to ask this question when discussion happens, or something like that?
Yeah, you might say worry. In general, so the 5 hindrances aren't meant to be an exhaustive categorization system. They aren't meant to be all-inclusive. The question, by the way, is what hindrance is it when your mind just wanders away from the breath to a thought like, I should really remember to ask this question. And so with that specific example, it might be worry. You could say that that was worry, perhaps. But more generally, you can basically assume that if you are caught up in concepts, self-attachment in some way, that just is a hindrance. Doesn't necessarily have to be one of the 5 or be analyzed in terms of one of the 5. But we can have, of course, the experience of being distracted, and we can work with it in any number of ways. We can just be mindful of it directly. We can notice what it's like. That's a valid way of working with that. We can try to fight with it, get rid of it. That's a valid way of working with it, to find out how that works. If we're doing that, then we're doing that. So we get to just explore that. Maybe we say we shouldn't fight with it. Okay, so now we're fighting with the fight with it. That's a valid way of working with it. It's fine. You're now fighting with the fight with it, so practice having equanimity with the fight with that hindrance. And so on. So the main thing is just, you can assume that if it isn't the focus space, if it isn't the direct experience of the focus space, then it's some kind of hindrance. If you're practicing in this way, if you decided that the focus space is going to be the breath and you're going to stay with that for some time, you can just assume that it's a hindrance and not worry too much about it. So no need to get caught up on figuring out which hindrance it is or whether it's one of the 5 or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Have a way of knowing, I guess, if anyone here is asking a question. So maybe just if you're behind me, also, the people on the screen, you can just start talking, and the same goes for you guys, but they'll take precedence. There are questions about the practice, or the talk, or the practice, or the practice, talk, path. Let's do it that way. Those are the current topics. One of those 3. Oh, you're very soft. I can't hear you very well. Try it, maybe. Yeah, maybe your sound is muted or your headphones aren't plugged in or something. I still can't hear you. You might have to maybe try typing it in or something.
Can you read this?
I can't see it.
Should I read it?
Yeah.
So Yanir says, I find in my practice lately that I'm getting attached to pleasurable feelings in the body and head.
Mm-hmm. Good. So pleasant feelings in the body and head. Yes? Is that what you were saying?
Yes. And while I want to increase this, how do I manage this?
Yeah, great. So the first point is
this the right approach?
Yeah, right. So the first thing is just so this is kind of a subtle point, so it might be a little confusing, but there are so you're going to have a problem the whole way through the path, from beginning to end, and the way that the path works is that you continually have better and better problems. Okay? So at first, we have the problem of being stuck on the hindrances, being stuck on habitual patterns that are unsatisfying and unskillful. We're stuck on those because there's a kind of pleasure in them. There's, for example, a kind of pleasure in starting a fight with someone. You know, there's kind of a buzz that comes from it. It's satisfying. There's a kind of pleasure in, you know, craving something and then getting it. You get the item and that's kind of satisfying a little. So we're doing these things because we're starved for pleasure, because we don't have a better way of getting pleasure. So as we start to progress along the path, of course, it's been said, we're going beyond all attachment. Ultimately, we want to have no attachment to anything whatsoever. But the way that we get there is that we get attached to better and better things. So we get attached to the kind of pleasure that comes from jhana, from deep absorptive states of bliss and joy, or the kind of pleasure that comes from metta, loving kindness practice, this love that fills our hearts and heads and radiates out into the world. This is a much better problem to have. Still a problem. It's still quite bad, but it's a much better problem to have. Saryu often talks about this. He says that you start having an awful problem, and then you trade that for a terrible problem. So now you have a terrible problem. Now you trade that problem for a very bad problem. So now you just have a very bad problem. So you trade that for a problem that's just bad. And then you trade that for a problem that's not so bad. And then you have a problem that's kind of bad. And then eventually you just stop having a problem. You let go of the best problem in the world to have. So that's the first point, is that there's nothing wrong. It's totally reasonable. It's actually skillful. Second point is, I think that this is one of those self-solving problems, actually, in a way. Because you tell me, if you experience the pleasure in your chest and head, then you get attached to it. When you get attached to it, is the pleasure still there? Is it still pleasurable? You'll have to type it in, I'm afraid.
No, it's replaced with yearning and desire.
Exactly. So this is a self-solving problem. In the same way as we were doing during that technique, we were just paying direct attention to whether we're experiencing hindrances or not. This is the sort of general purpose, long-term strategy for working through all of this stuff, is that we apply mindfulness. And our mind actually learns at an unconscious level to stop hurting ourselves. We had these habits running before, we were ignoring the consequences of them, and so we couldn't get the feedback that we needed to change them. Now we're attending to them. We're using mindfulness to directly attend to them, and we're now getting feedback. And so then gradually over time, so you do it again and again, 100 times, 1,000 times, the pleasure comes up, and the pleasure's there, and it's nice, and then we get attached to it, and it's painful, and we suffer. We just have to watch that happen a bunch of times. And then we get sick of it, and then we stop doing that. And then we have a new problem. Anything else on that?
Got it. Smiley face. No, thank you.
Thank you. Great. No one has anything to say about the talk. I don't believe you.
Joseph?
Hmm.
Can we ask questions about, like, when you say the talk, ask questions about the virus situation, like itself, or?
You mean the objective situation?
Not objective situation, but maybe something about how to see the situation. Well, I guess, you know, maybe say something that's been on my mind. I guess, like, I feel concerned about, you know, what direction humanity might take in response to this situation. Like, there's some things that maybe are in the right direction, like stopping commerce when that's not helpful, or stopping the wildlife trading, which was part of the cause of the problem. People eating bats. But there are other responses that seem maybe less helpful, like social distancing, or people relying more and more on like delivery services to get their supplies. Yeah, and then maybe with social distancing, there's more of this isolation, like instead of community building. But yeah, I wonder if you see. I'm not totally sure what the question is. Like, I feel kind of concerned about that. So maybe that's just a comment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a pivotal moment in history. And I think it is also kind of a religious battle. In other words, it's a meme war. We have these various ideas that have colonized, populated, taken over, co-opted our minds. These various ways of seeing things, of seeing what's good and bad, and they are fighting. They're at war. And the war is increasingly, I'm going to not talk to you just because two reasons. Main one is that I was actually sick. I had maybe coronavirus or maybe something else this past week, and so I don't want to spit on anyone. And also just because you're all there. So for those two reasons, first and primary one, I want to spit on people. Second, less important one, sorry, you're all there. It's only less important because she's over there. You're the most important thing in the world except for her right now. So it is a religious war. It is a situation in which these ideas are in combat, and more so I think because, things have shifted. It's as though we had a certain front. We were kind of entrenched. You could say that over the past little while, and what little while is maybe left as an exercise to the imagination. For the past little while, we've been kind of engaged in trench warfare, where there are different sides, and the different sides say different things, and value different things, and they are static because the territory is static. It's just kind of everyone is rehashing and reiterating the same battleground, and no one is making really very much progress in either direction. And now, suddenly, we're in a completely different world. The territory has completely shifted. Everything has changed. And as a result, I think increasingly, the war is going to become more intense. And frankly, I think that the war is in part a war between, well, it's really the war, it is the war of Mara. It actually is the war of Mara, of the, so some people may not know who or what Mara is. Mara is the Buddhist term for what the Christians call Satan, what the kind of like, but not quite, what the rationalists call Moloch. This sort of machine or entity of delusion and evil that is basically just self-perpetuating at all costs. And we have seen again and again throughout history that when this kind of shift is taking place, usually the advantage has gone to Mara. World War II, for example, this is, well, maybe an interesting statement, we'll see. Maybe just a completely straightforward statement, maybe a statement that will be problematic or something, we'll find out. You will tell me, I'm sure, one way or another. So before World War II, we kind of had, well, let's put it this way. With World War II, Mara was able to notice, the market system, the economic system was able to notice that there was roughly half, there was half again as much capacity to serve economic ends as there had been previously. And so Mara took advantage of that. And this was seen as good. This is now gender equality is happening. Good news, everyone gets to work. Is this actually good? That everyone now has to work, because this then becomes the new equilibrium, it becomes the new standard. Everyone has to work. Nobody is able to stay home and raise children. It's very hard to do that. Mara has found a way to mine more capacity, to get more of whatever it is that Mara wants, which isn't, particularly relevant or interesting to humans. And then we see that stayed, that remained after the war. So we needed to have a bunch more people working during this wartime effort, and then that mining of people's lives for currency persisted and was in fact celebrated. It was declared as a victory for gender equality, and of course it was in some ways. It's not that it wasn't. It wasn't. Things aren't so simple. It was of great benefit in many ways. It just also gave more advantage to Mara. And so here we are again, and we're seeing that the way that we have to address this virus involves giving Mara more control, turning over our lives to delivery services, virtual interactions. We have to ask the question, is this good or not? Is this actually the better world? Is this the world that we ought to live in? We have to really ask that question. And in order to ask that question, we have to first see what this is, what is really going on here. So we spent a lot of time talking about this last week. We talked about this point of cybernetics, that virtual reality unlocks a lot of potential for collaboration, and that's true. That's not true, that is true. And yet at the same time, you have to ask, is it the same thing if we're looking at each other through a screen as if we're here in person? I would actually say no, it isn't the same thing. There's a different thing that happens in person, and that matters, and that's worth fighting for, actually. That it isn't all just virtual reality. That yes, and moreover, that it seems like it's virtual reality because we are already in virtual reality, because we already are basing our life on conceiving, on conceptualization, on telling stories about things, on this mimetic war. We're already doing that. And so we're not really here with people when we're really here with people. And so it doesn't seem like there's any difference when the physical person isn't there anymore, because they weren't there before. So it doesn't matter. It's just the same. I would say that while it's true that we can be here more through virtual reality, and that is worth exploring, that's definitely worth exploring, also, there is such a thing as being with someone else in person, and that matters. And it isn't clear which way it's going to go. I think the way that it ultimately goes is going to be dependent on which meme, which religion wins, which one takes over, which one has the answer to the question that the current order, the current religion, market and state-based way of operating can't answer. A religion that has the answer to that people accept, that people find compelling, is the religion that decides what the future will be, whether we get to be together. So, those are some thoughts on that. Anything else on that?
Yeah, just realized as you're talking that, like, it, you know, yeah, I really get that sense of like sometimes it could feel like battling the view that like, oh, other people are bad, they are spreading illness, we need to stay away from them, like stuff. Like, we're just, you know, kind of in support of isolation, and I like really feel this sense of like we want to I guess we want to build a world that's like community based and local, yeah, where people do see other people in person more than like virtually, and yet like that feels like that always feels like it's yeah, it's like it's joyful and beneficial in the long term, but in the short term it seems harder, it seems like more challenging, and it just always feels like it loses out to like the instant solution of like, oh, let's just not see anybody else and like, you know, get our groceries delivered. So I feel daunted. I feel daunted by that. Maybe that's the view that I need to purify somehow.
This is a real issue, and I think I personally, for whatever that's worth, you know, take it as you will. I think that social distancing in response to this is actually a good idea. I think that's actually an appropriate response, given you come out of retreat. Maybe you haven't read the studies that have been done recently, or maybe you have, I don't know.
Do you mean like this social distancing definitely works to control the spread of the disease?
Yeah, right. So so people think,
sure.
So that it does. Yeah. So you're aware of that.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Yeah. So I think it does matter that we try to preserve human life. I think that does matter, and that is important. And I think that social distancing does seem like a way to do that, personally. And yet, you know, Soryu, for all, in Vermont, is still running the Sunday Sit in person. And I actually don't disagree with that. I recommended against it. I gave him my official recommendation that he take it virtual. And I don't disagree. I don't actually disagree with him on continuing in person. I see his point. I'm not going to make that point. It's not the hill I'm going to die on, so to speak. But I see his point because of what you say, because of the tendency to go in this direction. And
what was his point?
well, the point is just,
I missed it.
yeah, the point, it isn't really his. So the thing that he gave me was actually something that one of the residents said. So this wasn't Soryu personally, this was one of the residents in Vermont at Maple. And it was saying that it's better to die together than to live alone. That was this resident's standpoint on it. And that was a firm stance for that person. And I see the point. I see that point. And I personally don't agree. So it's now interesting and nice. We have, you know, 2 different chapters of this organization, and we're getting to innovate and cover more ground. So you guys are all here virtually with a chapter that's gone virtual for now. Maybe we'll come back to in person soon, but for now we're virtual. And Vermont, they're still meeting in person. The main thing is that this actually matters that much, that the emotions that come up are the appropriate level of emotion. Put another way, the emotional response, the magnitude of the emotional response is proportionate, is correct, is proportionate to the amount of matteringness of the situation. And also, we again see how these different tribal boundaries fall out, how these different ideas fall out. And it becomes really important to ask, what is true? What is useful? Should we preserve the lives of the older and the immunocompromised at the expense of wrecking the economy? That's a decision that we're making. We have to make that decision. We don't get to not make that decision. One way or another, we're making that decision. We wreck the economy, many people are going to lose their jobs. They will likely become disgruntled, upset. There will be social unrest. We're just deciding. We just are deciding. So it's very significant. We're deciding that. Anything else on that?
I'm just realizing, like, I actually think that social distancing seems like an effective response. My concern would be, like, if it becomes not yet another habit.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
yeah,
exactly. Somehow, oh, this is now the way to live from now on, instead of just like a response to the current situation.
Yeah, right.
But maybe that's more of an anxiety on my own part. That don't know how people are gonna think about this like even 6 months from now. So
yeah, right.
Yeah. I guess. I'm just becoming aware for myself that social bonds are important to me. So that's why I'm like concerned. So hopefully I'll just make sure I contribute to building up those social bonds again when this is hopefully more under control.
Yeah, right. And even now, I've actually found that I've had a lot of really nice social interactions over the past week at 6 feet of distance while wearing a mask. Outside with the neighbors, for example. It's actually quite lovely to meet and get to know people who don't have anything better to do.
I find that, I mean, with that choice of die together, live alone, it's been a very interesting flip of social assumptions, where suddenly many introverted people are bothered by the epidemic, obviously by the pandemic, but otherwise fine. As one who lives alone and works remotely, I think I've talked to all of my friends more this week than usual, mostly online, but there are more people spontaneously reaching out in various ways than I've ever seen.
So just a second, just to relay to the group here. So Henry's saying that he's found that as an introvert, it's interesting in that he's actually had more socialization this week. More people have reached out. More people have connected with him. And he's had more engaging interactions than usual over the past week. And go ahead and continue.
Yeah. I described it to one person as like, by default, the world is kind of built for extroverts talking to each other, particularly the public world that we see when we interact with each other, because that's extroverts. The extroverts have all been shoved into introvert world. Some of them aren't handling it well. and introverts are also now like, whoa, y'all are in a quiet room.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so he's saying the world has kind of been set up by default for extroverts to interact with each other. And now all of the extroverts are being shoved into introvert land and having to deal with that. And then also the introverts are going like, whoa, hold on. Yeah. Very well said.
Is there any chat or something about that?
Yeah, there's been Chao Chu is going to read the chat.
6 chats, main chats.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, they've been going on for a while.
I'm so sorry, we've missed a lot of chat.
Yep. I guess I will stick to, there's a question from Yanir. Yanir asks how this current situation, impact of the economy, potential changes in our society, etc., get resolved by the view that these are just concepts, and concepts are illusions/delusions of the mind. We want to preserve our society, but our current society is a concept, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the big picture point of the path. And this is why I have come to really enjoy and appreciate religion more and more personally as I have been doing this. So obviously, if you just say, well, these are social constructs and concepts, and you just say that, then all you've done is produced a new social construct, a new concept. Nothing else has changed whatsoever. You were better off before. You were slightly less conceptual before. Now you are slightly more conceptual. You were in the same position or maybe a little bit worse. The point of the path, the reason that there is a path at all, to the extent that we believe that there is a path and these aren't just all tricks to deceive people and take their money or something, to the extent that we believe that any of the spiritual teachers in history were actually honest, the path leads out of conceptualization. It leads out of social constructs. It leads to the direct experience of reality, unfiltered, unmediated by conceptualization. Prior to or having escaped from, because these are the same thing, conceptualization. So the huge claim of Buddhism, the huge claim that it makes is that it is possible to come to this point. It is possible to have experience prior to conceptualization, to experience reality directly, to see what's really there, not what our idea of it is. This is a huge claim. The claim is, so if that claim is true, then by going beyond, discarding, setting aside all concepts, all conceptualization, all concepts, all stories, we are able to see and act more appropriately. We are able to respond more skillfully to situations. which even means that we can conceptualize more skillfully. So the thing that makes a spiritual path, that brings it into the world, is that you have at least one person, right, as many people as possible, empowered, who have actually done that, who can actually see reality and can actually say what is true. Not their opinion, but what is actually true. So the first claim is that there is such a thing as truth. There is such a thing as reality. And this can be directly realized. It's a huge claim. You should be skeptical and dubious of this claim. I don't need to tell you that because you already are, and that's appropriate. That's good. Huge claim that there is such a thing as truth, and it is possible to directly realize it. Given that that's the case, having realized truth, you are now in a position to say which concepts, which stories, which ideas are true, are more or less true, because none of them are perfectly true. They're all concepts, they're all stories, they're all ideas. But which are more true? Which are more beneficial? What even is true? What even is beneficial? You're now in a position to say that with a little bit more authority. And with, if you fully walk it, with ultimate authority, is at least the claim. If you finish the path, then you have the ultimate authority of this, of Buddhahood, if you fully awaken. But maybe let's set that aside for now. You come to an experience that's more true. You now have authority, direct experience of what is true. Based on that, you can then construct things, stories, ideas, memes, that A, are more true, more accurate. For example, just to pick an example, an salient example, that not just humans, but all life should be in the decision function. That when we decide how to act, we shouldn't just account for what humans want, we should account for what all life wants. We can say that that is more true. That's just more true. Furthermore, that is more kind. That is more compassionate. That's more loving. That's helpful, beneficial to more beings. You can say that. You can say something and you can tell whether something is compassionate to only some beings or to more beings, whether it's more or less compassionate to beings. And finally, you can see what succeeds and fails in the marketplace of ideas. In other words, you can win. You can enter the me more and win. So this is basically the ultimate game, the ultimate goal of any spiritual tradition, is to create stories that are true and useful and win. So there's still stories, there's still lies, there's still constructions. It's not that they're not constructions. It would be great if we could bring the entire world beyond construction, but let's face it, that will probably take a while. We don't know if that's possible. You know, certainly it will take a while. It's not going to happen tomorrow in all likelihood. So that would be great, but given that that's not on the table, at least apparently, empirically, it seems that that's not on the table. What do you do instead? You just try to make stories that are less delusional. And that means that you don't just discard society wholesale. You know, you don't just discard what's working wholesale. There's a lot that's very useful and true. And, you know, winning, there's a lot that's winning. First of all, obviously, by definition, there's a lot that's winning in what's currently running the world. And there's a lot that's true in it. That every human does matter. This is true. And this was actually a step forward. This was progress. Because prior to this view, we had the view that not everyone matters. Only some of the humans matter. And then liberal humanism comes along and says, no, all of the humans matter. That's actually progress. That is a change. That's a shift. And furthermore, so it's more beneficial. It's also more accurate. And we want to keep that. We don't want to lose that. We just want to keep going. We want to move forward. We want to continue this process, and we want to continue it in a way that continues to track truth and usefulness and isn't just winning. So if you don't have truth or usefulness, and you just have winning, that's evil. That's just what evil is winning without truth or usefulness. Is power without wisdom or love. That's what evil is. Anything else on that?
Yanir says, thank you for that.
Thank you. So we'll now move into the next portion of the discussion. So thank you all for going along with that, coming along for the ride, and we will now spend a little bit of time talking about actions that we can take in the world, ways that we can organize, things we can do to respond to the circumstance in the world right now. So we did this last time, and it's modeled on something that we do in Vermont, where people list ideas, give actions, suggest things that can be done, and we then do them. So we then take those actions, we do those things. We read the resources, we consider the hypotheticals, and we do the suggested actions. And for this, I guess I will have to take notes. Unless someone else, because I'm the only one who can hear. Let's try to switch it. I'm going to try unplugging the headphones, and we'll just use the speakers and microphone, and you guys tell me if that's too noisy or bad or something.
Good idea.
Take notes.
That's okay. It's okay, good. Go do that. Okay. So, can you all hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you, but I'm probably going to have to sign out. Let me know if there's anything that comes out of this discussion that someone like me can act on.
Great, thank you.
Post it on Facebook.
Yeah, we'll post it on Facebook.
So I have urgency about this. The first thing is that I would love at some point in this call to know everybody's name in the room. We did our names here. We don't have to do that right this minute. The urgency that I have is around Soryu's plan to continue to have the Sunday sit. And the reason for that is I absolutely take his meaning with better to die together than to live alone. I also have a friend who is dying right now with COVID. And it is the point of not gathering is to not become infected or to infect others. And by having the Sunday sit and then possibly being exposed to someone who brings unknowingly, because we don't know when we're carrying it, brings the virus into the sit, and now all of the residents of Maple go back to Maple, and now we're infecting one another. And so, yes, indeed, dying together, this is of great concern to me. This is real, and the biggest reason to do social distancing is to not overload the healthcare system with a giant spike that it's already not equipped to deal with it. So to try to somehow flatten that. So that is my concern. And I'm hoping there is an action item that perhaps, I mean, I know Soryu has thought this all the way through, and the idea of dying together rather than living alone. I'm not probably saying anything that would make any difference, but I hope there is a way to make a point there.
Yeah, I think in that case, you can write to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just you can do that.
I'm starting to compose an email to some people at Maple right now. But
Sorry, you and Maple. They've been having this conversation for a month. So you can do that. Write to him, express your position, and there we are. I don't disagree with his point. Sorry to say it, because I, may have had this last week and got to really face that I might not make it until today. And I mean, it's true. We do die. We will die. And the point that he actually made in the most recent talk that he gave was that because we have this curse of knowledge, we equate failing to have people not die with killing. And one of the most difficult things that he ever said to me personally was that peace is what happens when no one is killed and everyone dies. And I'm starting to get a sense of what he was referring to with that. And you should, certainly talk to him. And I'll try not to, sorry, I broke my own rule. I'm sorry, I'm a hypocrite. I commented on an action item. This is how you don't do it. The good ground rule is that we aren't going to try to have much communication about whether the action items are good or bad. We're going to optimize for throughput. I'm sorry about that. I broke my own rule, so you can see how it's not done. Played the Heyoka role. And so let's list some other actions. What can we do?
This is Rich. So I'm finding out that this is why I practice, and even though I'm going through a training program on teaching, I'm being asked to teach. I'm being asked to step to the front. People are struggling. People are wondering what's going on with me and my wife and my family, and what's the deal, and can we find out more about that? And so I need to have courage and do it.
Yeah. And on that note, I've been thinking that there's going to be more and more need for grief counseling and therapy. Just people talking to other people as this continues. Because in all likelihood, we're all going to lose someone pretty soon, or know someone who's lost someone. And so I would suggest that we find a way of doing that. Put together a platform where people can sign up for calls with someone who has been trained minimally in how to listen and be with someone in their experience, and launch that.
Yeah, those exist.
Oh, great.
It's like, I don't know what the right keyword is, crisis counseling or something.
Oh, great.
Crisis hotline.
Great. So we should get on that. All of us should be doing that.
Was there a chat that came through?
Sorry?
There's a chat that came through.
David D says, thank you for today, signing off for this week.
Take care, David. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to say I'm feeling pretty pissed off about the like interaction or interjection there. Yeah, that's just, I don't know what way to roll with that, but partly I don't know how this thing intermingled with that, but maybe something less important, as I'm just confused. You said you didn't disagree, but you said you did disagree, and I'm like kind of confused. Were you like an official position or an unofficial one or what? I don't know it, because you said you were not doing that, so I'm just confused what you. That's the less important thing, but that was just a confusion. Anyway,
keep it to action items for now. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Action item was I'm really interested in setting up co-working, like maybe a Zoom call for 4 hours in the morning, if anyone wants to join that.
Anything else? I think it's actually good to look at this. We often feel very urgent about things that aren't that urgent. I'm sorry to say. Someone just came out of the woodwork recently to try to destroy this organization because they felt mad at me. And we have to really look at this. How are we prioritizing what we do? Is there a use of time right now to attempt to destroy an organization that is going to help people? Or is there something better that we can be doing with our time? We have to actually look at this.
Want me to read you Nir's message?
Yeah.
Nir says, I think the main thing we can do is to promote social distancing. Lots of people do not take it seriously.
Great. So promote social distancing, and especially with people who don't take it seriously. I think it's a challenge. Very easy to promote social distancing with people who take it seriously.
Joshin, this is a really good group, and it's really helping me. I'm a healthcare worker that works in a pharmacy, and I have a lot of opinions about the way healthcare is delivered. And it all feels very urgent. But the thing I'm taking away from this is, can I find that place of calm and safety within me before I start deciding what I'm going to do? I forget exactly how you said it an hour ago, but it's very, very helpful to let all this come up in me and then see what kind of action I want to take, because that's where my responsibility is, to use a word that Renee and I talked about yesterday, to meditate deeply, consider deeply, to honor my feelings, and then put them into action. So thank you.
Thank you. Well said. And as well, I'll just mention, since it's come up several times already, this is a time when really many people are emotionally stretched thin, and to have tolerance and patience and forbearance, to really practice that. Which doesn't mean that we don't express our opinions or our views. is that we know that we and they may not be doing so maximally skillfully. And have acceptance around that.
Joshua, we mentioned crisis hotlines earlier, so I wonder there are some specific action items. Could be looking into volunteering for a hotline, your local hotline, or look up like an online course on like basic peer grief counseling. Perhaps those could be like more specific action points.
I also think just like offering calls to your friends, just like, hey friends, I will be on Zoom for 3 hours tonight. You want to talk to me?
Yeah, regular appointment slots or Calendly or something.
Calendly. I'm trying to figure out, I'd like to do one of those two things and I'm not sure which one. Maybe I'll experiment.
Calendly. Can you see that? What's that called?
Calendly.
Calendly.
And create like slots for other people to book calls with you, and then they can book calls with you.
Yeah, you list your available time, so it's easy. You don't have to, keep telling everyone when you're available.
You don't have to juggle.
Yeah.
You're changing availability as people pick slots. Nice.
They always see your latest availability.
Yeah, and you can sync it to your calendar, so you can block out time on your calendar, and then it will show up as blocked up. Very good. Very good technology.
talk.
I've been offering 2 toggling mindfulness practices for people who are mindful but don't necessarily have a practice. And one of them is feel, honor everything that you feel. Don't preference suffering and anxiety and fear. If there is joy coming up, you're allowed to have that. It's important to have that. And it's remarkable how that is a piece that isn't there for people. I'm supposed to feel bad. I'm supposed to hurt for everybody. Feel what's alive for you. That's the one. The other one is doing nurture positive that starts with a gratitude list, starts with deeply knowing what it is that I'm grateful for, and then feeling that in metta that ripples through the body, that is cleaning up the ecosystem. And I've been offering that on Zoom call, on Facebook Live, and it's seeming to land well for people. So recommending that.
Nice.
This is just a thought. There's a mailing list for this neighborhood. It's kind of unusual in that way. And people have been really taking advantage of it to go grocery shopping for each other. So if you're in a neighborhood that doesn't have a mailing list, maybe, and you're healthy, maybe go around with a printout with your number or something saying, I'm happy to pick up groceries for you. There may be, people who are vulnerable or older who are isolated and may not know of a way to get groceries otherwise. And so that can be helpful to them.
You mentioned yesterday about how cases of domestic violence are on the rise because people are trapped in their homes together, and I was starting to think about women's shelters and whether there's thinking I'd like to do some research into whether there are places that need help or some kind of help for people who are affected by that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Any ways to help resolve situations of domestic violence for either gender?
Yeah.
Of course, primarily women, but statistically more likely recipient
Yeah, conflict resolution.
Yeah.
I think you could also, yeah, just like generally reaching out to volunteer. Like I feel like it makes it so conceptually. I think of like volunteering as something like that you do in person. So it's hard for me to wrap my mind around ways of making it non like making it virtual, but just generally like reaching out to like I feel like there's probably like my sense is there are probably many people who want to figure out how to help, and there are probably many organizations that are doing the same brainstorm right now that you can tap into and offer your service to. So like we can hotline shelter and things like that. But I just think it's actually just like a general topic of like there are people like I know people want to help, and there are institutions and organizations that are probably brainstorming answers, like looking for that.
So you can put out an open call on Facebook, like, hey guys, I want to help. You want to know how ways I can help?
Yeah,
your
exactly.
Facebook friends can tell you here are 30 ways you can help.
Yeah, exactly. Or like here, I connect you to this. Like we actually have a lot of like I'm grateful for things like Facebook or like social networking, interfacing in that way for this opportunity to like be connected in a virtual way at this time. It's something we're really fortunate to have.
Pretty cool.
And also to consider how we might start up a Manhattan Project of similar scope for the other issues that are facing life on Earth. Now that we have incontrovertible evidence that we can do this, why not start on those also? What better time than now?
Good idea.
I want to like add to that like ideas for how like how to leverage the fact that people are real. Like I feel like it's sort of been we talk about like things being blown out, like things kind of being revealed to us as being a good thing about like the economy maybe collapsing and things like maybe that there's something good, and my reaction was like, oh, but people, I know what people are like, and they don't actually like handle these things well. They get afraid, and then they do make terrible decisions, and this could just be one tidal wave of things. And so I'm like, how can we like with kindness and wisdom, like be like, look, this is real, this is happening to us. Like, how can we mass spread this idea that like this is real? So like actually how like climate change is real, and it will be worth it. How can we actually like not like make this fear, like perpetuate the fear, but like use that fear to like how can we actually do that? Like YouTube videos, like like I would like want to actual brainstorm of how to actually do that so that it's like widespread enough that people like that it becomes an emergent property, that it becomes the same way that the that we can have I don't know, how do we actually make that happen? At least so how do we even like begin a wave?
So I had a plan that I was hoping I could spend a lot more time on this, which was basically to like coaching hop, like try to coach a client in a certain like I was gonna start with SF type focus and like coach those people and impress enough of them to like get to coach like a better like a higher up class of clients in the chain and just like gradually pop up the chain until I got to like Peter Thiel or somebody. And then be like, yo, Peter Thiel, what's up? Here's the deal. Anyway, I may try a smaller, simpler version of that. It's like, I think there's a lot to be said about using this as an opportunity to teach people how to agree. Like, okay, there's this thing that's happening. It's hard for you to let in because in order to let in, you have to agree to a lot of stuff. So let's do that. Let's learn how to agree together. Right? And then met once.
And let's try to keep the shares kind of brief.
Richard D says, thank you to everyone. Be safe. Care for yourself and each other. Love you all. Jeremy Schletter says, thank you, everyone. I'm signing off for today.
You too, Dad. Nice to see you, Jeremy.
And Henry Andrews says, thank you, Joshin, and everyone. And Renee D. put a link.
I posted a link that if you know somebody who would benefit from being on the Nextdoor app that Joshin was talking about, it's a national thing. So you could share that link with other people who could then go and sign up for Nextdoor.
It's like a neighborhood social network.
Yeah, there's another one called Neighbors for Neighbors. I don't know. Nationwide.
Yanir says, thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure to practice with you all. Signing off.
Great. Well, we're about at time now, so let's now.
So can I get my wish of everybody saying who they are?
Yeah, good idea. Yes. So I'm Joe.
Hi, Joshin.
Hi, Mama.
Hi, Pan.
Everybody, I'm Pan. It's lovely to be here with you.
I'm so happy that you're here.
This is what I look like. Hello.
Hi, I'm Alice. I'm the newest apprentice at Oak. I was an apprentice at Maple for 2 months, and then I lived in the Bay Area before that. So this is an amazing welcoming party. Anyway, that's it.
Hello, I'm Wednesday. I don't know if you can see me, but I'm back here.
Hi, Wednesday.
Sunny, it's really nice to see you.
Hi.
Great to know you. Hi.
Great.
Hey, Chachu.
I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's starting to get real. I appreciate that.